Professor Howard Williams takes you on a journey through time and space, exploring death and memory, past and present. Archaeodeath.
My name is Rabbi Hannah. I am the Rebel Rabbi, and I also am a classically trained nerd, and I am completely and totally in love with Doctor Who. I am just currently waiting for the other of my duo, which is Professor Howard Williams. How are you,
Hello,
Professor?
everybody. How are you? Hi, Rabbi. How are things going?
I'm well. I pulled a muscle in my left shoulder this morning, which just is a reminder that I'm almost 50. That's really what it is. It's just Hashem's way of saying, remember that body I gave you? It's getting older. So I was letting everyone know that today we are going to be discussing the regen of David Tennant into Matt Smith, and that first series, because I'm trying to be nice to the Brit, the first series of Matt Smith's iconic Doctor. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit about the specials leading. Are you okay if we talk a little bit about the specials leading up to the regen? Because the next Doctor with David Morrissey happens to be one of my more favorite of the David Tennant specials.
Absolutely.
We will be taking questions at the end. If you've been here before, you know that we kind of have a conversation. We go over some points that we have secretly, don't mind the man behind the curtain, have been talking about over the last week or two. And then if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and say that it's Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer them right at the end. So if you're ready to do this,
I'm ready.
I'm totally ready. You ready to visit the TARDIS? Let's get to it.
I don't have any jelly babies today.
So no jelly babies. Well, you know what? Thank you for, by the way, explaining to me what a jammy Dodger was, because I really did think it was a donut.
Fish custard. Who doesn't have fish custard?
See, fish fingers and custard actually sound pretty yummy to me. And yes, we do look fabulous in our scarves. And I see you have your Shakespearean insult mug, so I think we're ready to go.
Oh yes, I saw my recent video about my Shakespearean insult mug. Yes, here it is, the actual authentic Shakespearean insult mug. So there you are, all the insults.
Fusty nut without a kernel.
I did call someone a fusty nut in response to my video today, so which is being actively deployed. It's not in reserve now. It's been, as to use militaristic terms, it's been deployed in the field of combat on TikTok. It's active service. It gets a tour of duty mug for 2022 TikTok does this Shakespeare. But anyway, we're going astray already. But yeah, I mean, so we did this wonderful 1 to 4, and now we're back for 5. There's so much more to discuss in this one series alone, isn't there? I mean, pretty amazing.
Absolutely. So last we left off, the Doctor is alone. David Tennant no longer has Rose, no longer has Donna, because the Dr. Donna had to have her memory erased. And the first thing he does is run into David Morrissey, who believes he's the Doctor. Yeah. That opening scene for the next Doctor is possibly one of my favorites. Here is somebody yelling Doctor, and of course David Tennant goes running, and really it's already David Morrissey standing there with his sonic screwdriver, fighting off a timorous beastie, which, by the way, I think I love as an insult, and I want to say that to people. You timorous beastie.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, what are some of your favorite moments from the David Morrissey Next Doctor? And I would love to know, what are some of the archaeological, if any, implications that you see in the Next Doctor?
Yeah, so the Next Doctor. I mean, this is an interesting episode, isn't it? So this is sort of end of season 4, beginning. It's in those transition, the series of specials, isn't it? So you have the Next Doctor, the Planet of the Dead, the Waters of Mars, and then the End of Time 1 and 2. Yeah, and these. I mean, I suppose the main thing is that it's a classic Victorian Christmassy special setting, isn't it? I suppose one of the things I like is about how they deploy a cemetery. Obviously, the Cybermen and cemeteries is a theme that keeps coming back and back, and we'll come back to that. The idea they obviously are cyborgs. They were once human in some fashion or form, or once humanoid, and they come out of the cemetery to slay all the great and good men of the town at the bequest of the I can't remember her name, but the baddie, the lady who becomes the Cyber King.
Slattern.
And yeah. And so I like the funerary element. The funerary settings is a constant theme, and that's one of the most powerful ones. We get that back in a later series with cemeteries as places where Cybermen emerge, come upon the viewer and the unsuspecting audience. So that's the first thing that comes to mind from that episode, I must say.
I like how it's almost like this sacred part of the cemetery. Here we have the sacred cemetery. We're having this funeral, and this woman shows up just in red. It's almost to defy death. To me, that's how I take it. She's defying death. She's defying that this is supposed to be a somber occasion. And she's like looking at these men like, I dare you to say something to me and have it insult me. Whatever you have to say to me does not matter to me in this moment. I love that part.
So defies funerary conventions in her dress, and then the cyber, and the scariest thing, of course, is those cyber chimps things. What are they called? They're really freaky. They're really sort of the sort of ape cyber apes. They're kind of they didn't do enough with it.
No, and it's the only time we see them. I don't think we see these beasts at any other episode except for this one. For me, some of the things that stand out for me in terms of like religion and faith is that we see David Morrissey has taken on the persona of the Doctor as a way to cope with loss and pain. And how often have we as human beings had something so unbelievably awful happen to us that we almost become a different person while we are simultaneously trying to work through the pain? He's avoiding the pain. He's avoiding the harm and hurt that has happened to him. And he does that by being the Doctor. It's almost his safe space and his ability to like cocoon himself in this other, like wrap himself up and pretend like the world doesn't exist because he's just this person. But those things are still kind of coming through the cracks. He's not going to get up in his TARDIS, tethered Ariel with, what was it?
Yes, tethered I can't remember. Ariel.
Yeah. He's not going to actually get up there because he knows eventually at the end he's going to have to face whatever he has to and kind of process it and go through it. And I find that humbling to watch that process in general. I'm just like, that's good. And as you know, I cry at everything. So,
I mean, I think for me, that episode embodies a lot of our anxieties about the Victorian legacy and the legacy of Victorian industrialization, mechanization, and mass death because of disease and inner city slums, child labour. It has all those classic Dickensian themes, or after Dickensian, perhaps a bad way of putting it, late Victorian actually, themes of poor workers' rights, poor sanitation, and thinking through that as the backdrop. And these people are deeply scarred by the nature of humanity at that time, and the Cybermen rocking up into that realm. And it's not the first time and only time that the Victorian England, London particularly, it keeps coming back as a theme. We saw it in the Talons of Wing Chang. We have it, in the Fourth Doctor. We have it, very sort of very xenophobic actually in many ways, but sort of the sort of portrayal of Chinese ethnicity in a Victorian period. But we have it coming back in this new guise, and then there's going to be future episodes where future Doctors deal with Victorian London in different ways. But I think this episode does have that trauma of like the escapism of otherworldliness is both potential. But the way that encapsulated for me, and this is maybe overthinking it, but I like the fact that we never encounter in any other episode before a sort of larger than life cyber king dreadnought type, and they call it a dreadnought. And I think that's really interesting because I was thinking about that in terms of that's if, maybe I'm overthinking this, but just bear with me, indulge me, right? So it's set in a Victorian England, and I think in a literary terms, thinking of the dreadnoughts of the decade leading up to the First World War, the ultimate culmination of Victorian and Edwardian, militarism and escalating conflict. The First World War is the end of that era. It's not in the 19th century, it's in the early 20th century. The dreadnought, for many people, outside of the military historian Greek geeks will be able to correct me, but I think a popular perception of the dreadnoughts is so almost too big to fight with, almost too ridiculous, almost too terrifying, that they're never actually, beyond the Battle of Jutland, they're never fully deployed in an effective way. And I just have this, I don't know, maybe that's me, but I feel that the use of that term for the cyber kings, agent of mass destruction, he's going to destroy the whole town, is almost like a sort of heralding of what's going to come with the First World War. In the same way as in the previous series, The Family of Blood, you have this sort of what's coming. We're in a pre-modern age. This is what's coming, and it may come from outer space or it may come from our own creation. So I think it's another episode where they're playing off the inherent inhumanity of man or person, of humanity, and our ability to mass destroy, as well as these external threats which allow people to fight again. So I don't know, that's what I got out of that episode, and thinking about Doctor Who, not really, but I like that sort of anyway.
You bring up a good point for me. So I feel like that one of the things this episode does is talk about the escapism. David Morrissey is trying to escape. But the parallel is, and what is not lost on me, is that exactly what we're doing as viewers. We are using Doctor Who itself as our own sort of escapism. And so I really love that part. I do agree with you. And I find that they play with the gender a little bit, because she's still referred to as the Cyber King. She is this woman who then becomes the Cyber King and is still referred to as that. So I like that little bit of play with almost the idea of gender roles that I don't know if the writers did on purpose, but to me, as someone who also is someone who plays with gender in terms of how I refer to myself and with pronouns and how I prefer to be referred to, it was a small light for me to be like, oh, so they didn't automatically go Cyber Queen. They still kept this idea that she was still the Cyber King. The other part for me is the way that the actual Doctor, David Tennant, behaves with David Morrissey. The way he is calm and sweet and just allows him to have this journey of self-discovery of who he really is. He doesn't say, no, you're not the Doctor. I'm really the Doctor. Yes.
He doesn't. And then he realizes he better not admit it, because he realizes there's something else going on. But I'd like to respond to that point about gender, because I think that the gender issue is, again, that dichotomy between the internal inhumanity versus the external inhumanity, the alien cruelty, because she's a woman who, through the way she's been abused, treated, is bitter and angry and turns to the Cybermen and becomes their stooge, right? But she overcomes them, and so there's this whole game of she is a creation of Victorian England's misogyny, chauvinism, hierarchy, sexual abuse, and yet she uses the cyber technology to transform her own gendered identity. So she is not the Cybermen think they can control her like the men did that she destroyed, but she dominates them. So I love that play of domination and a gender identity and transgressing, because she obviously is neither really female or male at the end in that role, in that identity.
Exactly. And
that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before you started mentioning it. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And I love that even though the Doctor is on his own, no more Donna, no more Martha, no more anyone, he is still finding himself in need almost of companions. He still finds himself hooked up to Rosita and to the next Doctor, as ends up being still sort of his pseudo companions, even in the short term, which to me just lends itself to the understanding that he is not good by himself. He does not know how to be by himself. So I really love that part too. I have okay, so I have to tell you that until you and I watched Planet of the Dead together, I had never watched Planet of the Dead.
Oh, so somehow you skipped it in the sequence. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I just every time. Well, what happened is the times that I have watched through Doctor Who has usually been with other people, and they have seen it, and they were like, "Oh no, this is a boring one." So I'd be like, "All right, well then we'll just move on." So until you and I watched it together, I had never seen it, and it was very compelling for me. I thought it was remarkable.
Episode. So just to remind people, this is obviously the idea that Lady D'Souza's robbing an artifact from a museum. The Doctor runs into a it starts off being the naffest episode, and I was cringing watching it originally. I thought this is painful cringe, and then they're on a bus. It goes through into this planet of seemingly a desert planet, and then we realise that we unfold that this whole planet is being eaten by these kind of metallic trilobite things that are basically roving around and creating portals between worlds through the very motion of their collective action, and then jumping to worlds and stripping them bare. And they have to get back, and there's these insectoid creatures that are also coming there and finding themselves in trouble. And if I could jump in with the spiritual element, because there's an archaeological and spiritual element, and the archaeological element that really strikes out to me is, of course, this is one of a number of times where museums feature as authentic heritage discourse. The museum is a place where in this case, being robbed by Lady D'Souza, she's robbing the cup of Halvar, the Hal the Good, given to Athelstan. So this is my period. This is a rare chalice. It's not very good. It's not very impressive. But the point is, the chalice becomes instrumental in the story because it provides the capability for them to get back. But the Doctor shows his ability to care so little for historical archaeological artifacts. He just bashes it to allow them to survive, which is, of course, the priority of everybody should be. We care about things, but people should matter more. But the object is there's a lot of ideas of subversion, of theft. Of ancient, and it's interesting that it was an Anglo-Saxon object, an early medieval period object, at a time where Athelstan, the grandson of Alfred the Great, is forging this Saxon empire and calling himself king of of the island for the first time, a sort of giving himself that Roman imperial identity, and an object that connects to Haldar, who's the closest Wales has to a real Welsh king in the early Middle Ages, is Haldar. Wales didn't exist in the early Middle Ages, despite what Welsh people will tell you. But in terms of overlordship, we're looking at and the idea is it's pitched as this is an object. I think it's very careful. What I'm saying is that object is not really irrelevant to the plot, but it's carefully thought through as to which object it would be that would embody something of early Britain and the relationship between the ultimate Welsh overlord and the ultimate English overlord, and a gift sent between them. And I thought that was really canny. And then the Doctor, in the end, it's the mechanism for their escape and survival, but the Doctor shows old things, who cares, break it up, we need it. And so there's lots of liberating, almost subversive ideas about what is heritage and what is valuable there. I just wanted to say that. But the other theme about Planet of the Dead I'd want to say is the spiritual one, is the lady on the bus who can almost see the future, see death. She can see death coming. And it's never explained. And again, we talked about this last time. The Doctor doesn't know everything. He doesn't understand everything. And the Doctor's relationship with if there are any higher powers or any forces out there, is left ambiguous. And some of the more humble characters do the jobs for him. So on the planet Midnight, it's a stewardess that saves him and from some unassailable enemy.
Unknown.
In this case, that she actually provides a lot of the information, at least to give them a clue that something dangerous is going to happen. So I like that. I like that, playing with sort of supernatural elements, or spiritual elements, I should say.
Well, for me, the woman on the bus who is the one who's almost like able to cross the veil is literally almost the person who is the connected voice for the Doctor, and is almost the one who's literally steering what is happening. And even she says, your time is coming. At the end of the episode, she's like, your time is coming, and he will knock 4 times. And of course we know that the Doctor is assuming that is going to be something it isn't, and what it ends up being, which we'll get to, is completely something incredible. And yes, we are talking Doctor Who. We're talking about the specials of David Tennant going into Matt Smith in the first series of Matt Smith. Now, for me, I'm going to move us ahead to the Waters of Mars, because to me, the Waters of Mars is all about self-determination versus destiny.
Mm.
Are we creating our own existence, or has our existence been pre-planned and there's nothing we can do about it? Because if we think about the Waters of Mars, the Doctor, the entire time, he is hell-bent on saving the people who are on this base. No matter what is happening, he's going to save them. But we come to that end where she decides, well, this is what the destiny says. I'm supposed to die this day so that my granddaughter becomes this great person. And if that's what's going to happen, do I take it in my own hands and make it still the same thing? So does that little change? He fights against destiny all the time. Let's be honest. That's kind of his shtick, is he wants to fight against the idea of Bashert, of destiny, of meant to be. And he fights against that. But this is one of those instances where he just does not win. You know, here's this woman who's like, no, I am going to take it. And so there's this kind of fight between, are we predestined or do we make our own destiny? And I love that. And just the way the characters interplay with each other. What are your thoughts, Professor?
Well, I was going to say the way that's set up is, this is an episode where tech takes a backseat. The robot is lame, in the classic retro sci-fi lame gadget robot. It just, and that's on purpose. And the Doctor tweaks it to get away from it's got the tech isn't going to save people here, right? The other point that sets up your point, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just sort of saying this is, I think, part of the story, is that this is utter classic horror, the possession of people's possession, people being taken over. It's demonic possession stuff, right? So it's got that horror element too. That's important, I think, sets it up. And then, of course, the thing that's really most uncanny thing about the whole episode for me is, and I think you said this to me in a communication before this, the whole episode is about the Doctor in dialogue with the dead. He knows their obituaries. He knows their date of death. He's going, oh, you're this person, you're this person. He's utterly lame as an anthropologist. He's just letting on. He knows basically the end game, and yet he's watching them die. He's reflecting on should he intervene, should he not intervene? What powers do I have? So the horror is from this horrific water on Mars that takes over because they're exploiting the frozen water that's been frozen for whatever. They do give a date. They say something ridiculous. I don't know what it. Yeah, but 80,000 years, that's way too short. But in my understandings of the history of Mars, if there was ever any water on Mars, it would have been, anyway, I don't know enough about that. But my point is, the idea is that this water's been just waiting for a host. But my point is, he's just watching this happen, and tech isn't going to save them. The TARDIS can't save them. Although one could question why, and he does. In the end, he manages to save. He makes the decision to save them, and then the humans make the choice about how they deal with that situation, and that is the most touching moment, isn't it?
For me, I think that he's like, I can't change anything, fixed point in time. He goes through all of that in his head, but I wonder if he was trying to save them as a way to show that he himself could save himself. He still has that plan in his head. Well, not 4 times. I'm coming to the end of my journey. And is he attempting to save them for himself or for them? And is he doing it against their will? Because that's kind of almost like what's happening is they've resigned themselves that this is what's going to happen to them. They're going to be into the echoes of history, and their sacrifices are what push humanity forward. And he's like, that's not good enough for me. I refuse to admit defeat. And that seems to be, especially with David Tennant's run, that is definitely one of his hallmarks, is he refuses to admit that maybe he can't do something. So for me, watching him then fight against it with such vigor is almost like him fighting against his own mortality, saying, I'm going to save you as a way to save myself.
Certain humans are shown, Lindsay Duncan's character, who has revealed her future, her offspring will lead, expeditions, and she is left to make the choice about how she reduces limitation of the doctor's meddling. He's a time meddler. She actually makes the decision to confront her own mortality in a way the doctor can't, in the same way that actually Vincent does. In an episode we come on to, Vincent van Gogh, he knows he got the doctor subverts it, messes up, shows Vincent his future in a very amazingly touching scene. But Vincent can't change. And is that because he's a victim, or is it because he makes the choice that he is going to do what he's going to do? And it's almost liberating, not that you're going to live forever or you can escape your fate, but it's liberating to know your fate will not lead to your doom. It leads to a kind of immortality of another form. So both Lindsay Duncan's character and the Van Gogh character have that ability to see transcend their own mortality, almost in defiance of the Doctor.
Right.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe
I agree with you. I mean,
again.
and I like that I like that you said Van Gogh, because that is the correct pronunciation, no matter what you British people
That was
say.
an accident. I'm not going to argue
aside,
with
that's
you.
An argument. The professor
you've got this inherent disability of being from California, and I didn't want to bring this up on a live and turn it into a one of those shouty lies where we disagree. But I'm working with your inability to be British.
Here's the thing: we can disagree, and I'm still right. Let's just go with that. Okay, so for me, the next one is we are at. That's right. Yes, that's right. I'm the rabbi. Is we have the End of Time Part 1 and 2, and the way. Hold on, just one moment. I'm sorry, Coral. We're going to have guests at the end, but we're trying to get through our kind of fixed stuff, and then we're going to bring on people afterward.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Any questions afterwards? That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. The End of Time Part 1 and 2 is, for me, such an iconic portrayal of the end of a Doctor, because we don't have that before. We have Christopher Eccleston going into David Tennant, and it's just that. But the End of Time is like, this is the entire End of Time arc is funerary. It is literally the Ood singing. He's trying to get his end of life arrangements done. He's visiting all the things he wants to make right before he knows he's going out. And he treats this regen as if it's the end of the Doctor entirely. It's not just, I'm going to regen into someone new. He treats it like a true death, and so does the universe. That's what gets me. It isn't just him. It's the universe. The Ood are like, we're going to sing your song. We're going to sing you to sleep, Doctor. And I'm just like, Now, I don't know if the writers did that because they knew that the viewer had an attachment to David Tennant as the Doctor. Because we know that up until David Tennant's run, Tom Baker was the most loved Doctor. Every year in Doctor Who magazine, there is a poll taken, who is your most favorite Doctor? Tom Baker won every year. Until David Tennant came in. Then David Tennant started giving Tom Baker a run for his money. So I don't know if this was a love letter to the fans to say, we know that this is almost an end of an era for you, and so we're going to do it upright. But the emotional context that happens over these two, not just for the Doctor, but for the Master. I think people do not take into account the way that End of Time Part 1 and 2 treat and understand. It's almost to me a redemption arc for the Master. And I will tell you, I'm all about the redemption arc. You start out as a bad guy and you become, you go through redemption. I'm there for it. And this is probably one of my most favorite redemptions to see, is to watch Saxon go from this crazy, I have to eat everything in sight, my hunger is so voracious I can't stop, to realizing that, pardon my Hebrew, he had been fucked with by the Time Lord since as being a child, that they intentionally drove him mad
Mhm.
for some kind of wild end game that we, don't even, and Timothy Dalton. What can I say?
There's quite a lot of quick things I want to say about these pair of episodes. Firstly, people need to be
Let's do
aware
it.
that the name Harold Saxon is not arbitrary. This is playing on a long-running literary mocking and negativity of our early Englishness, because he's basically a bit of a fascist, prime minister. He's a Boris Johnson plus. And this was done at a time when nobody in Britain could imagine that such a buffoonic quasi-fascist could become a British prime minister. And now we're into, how many are we into now? 3. But anyway, this was from a time where that was seen to be the closest thing you could parody was Tony Blair, who seems now almost sane compared with what we face now. But you've got to understand this. This is from before the time of modern British prime ministers, and so the name Harold Saxon is a parody of a kind of it's very much like the V for Vendetta Norse Fire, played by John Hurt, who also plays the Doctor, obviously the War Doctor. The idea of sort of a futuristic Britain which draws on its patriotic Victorian ideals of Englishness and patriotism, but tries to forge a new British Empire. So that's important. Then there's the idea that then another people who want to come back are the Time Lords themselves, and Timothy Dalton, who hammy overacting, brilliant. Timothy Dalton, I've got the razzle on, with my big, hilariously bad and good at the same time. I don't know what people think about that. And he's trying to get immortality by just ending time. Then you've got the Masters trying to consume. The other thing I wanted to say about this episode that's perhaps a sideline for most people, but I think it's really interesting, is one example where we see the archaeology of the TARDIS, because the Doctor goes, Wilf goes into the church and sees in the stained glass window and learns about the legend of the blue box. And there's a convent that a demon fell from the sky and a man in a blue box, the sainted physician, smote the demon and it disappeared. So we're getting the material evidence, a piece of medieval stained glass that tells the story of one of the Doctor's previous interventions on Earth. And for me, that is the archaeology of Doctor Who, actually, right there. How in the story humans are finding traces through their history of ancient aliens, but in this case it's the Doctor saving them, the Doctor intervening, and sometimes it's being honoured, commemorated in material culture. So I thought that was very cool. And if I may say one other thing about this is you've also got the cult of the Master. That there's a whole group of crazy people trying to bring the Master back to life through his ring, which survives his cremation. So you've got this idea of a cult of the crazy despot, which is why you should always dump people who are likely to engender a cult. You never say where their graves are, or you dump them in the Indian Ocean like the Americans did with bin Laden, or you make sure no one can get at their corpse because some freak will start a cult around it. It's true in Germany. It's true of every dictator. There's always a freak that will want to evoke this. And this is why, in Germany of the last 60, 70 years has had such an aggressive response to neo-Nazis taking on, trying to have shrines, trying to have locations which are linked to their version of mid-20th century history. And so I think that's a really interesting point. The Doctor cremates the Master, which I think was a big mistake, because we don't really learn, but I think he's trying to honour the Master as in the previous series. Is that a Time Lord disposal method? We don't know, but the idea is that allows his ring to come back. So I thought that was an interesting idea, the cult of the baddie, through death, and try and bring him back. But then the key point is, as you say, that the regeneration is almost like cremation. It's like the emergence of Matt Smith's Doctor is like the TARDIS breaks, the world breaks, his body breaks. It's very violent and dramatic,
yes.
fiery. Yeah.
And so the other two things that I noticed is when we see these Council of Time Lords, including Timothy Dalton, there's a woman who is like the seer, and she's covered in like almost these runic type of symbols. And I love that they're kind of showing this almost like that as being a prophetess, you have to almost be quite not there. it kind of parallels for me the idea of, like, if we go over to Vikings, the TV show, that we have the seer there who's kind of in this same almost like shrouded kind of affectation. And I find it's interesting to me that it's almost like runic symbols that are all over this prophetess while she sits there scribbling away at whatever scenes that she has. So there's that, and it does not pass me by that you have these women who are behind Timothy Dalton doing the symbology that we see earlier with the weeping angels.
Yes,
and I believe that one of those women,
they are shamed like the weeping angels of old, and we're left wondering what that.
Yes.
How does he?
But they never tell us. They never tell us what it is. I have a theory that the woman who comes to Wilf talking about the doctor and the TARDIS and in the church is actually his mother, because the way that David Tennant sees her when she uncovers her face and is just staring at him, the look that he gives her is familial, to me at least. That's how I interpret that maybe that was his mother, and she stepped out of what she was supposed to do. And maybe that's why she's in shame, is because she took herself and inserted herself to try and save her child. Like, what mother, as a parent, what mother wouldn't absolutely
it's almost like
try to risk everything to do it?
Either the writers didn't have a clue what they were doing, and they were deliberately making lots of stuff open-ended so that fans could spend hours and hours making various guesses.
I mean, but that's part of the fun is the idea of fan theology, and I think that's what it is I think that there is inherently a part of any kind of media that relies on fan theology to make it live and thrive. So for me, when we're in this, and I love the cacti, I do. I love the cactus, folks. I just do. I love the end, but it is like this violent, this is also the first time we see the destruction of the inside of the TARDIS. The TARDIS also goes through this recreation, this regen of its own sort. The entire thing explodes along with him. And that last moment of Doctor looking at the screen and saying, I don't want to go. He understands that he's going to continue, but not in the way that he has been continuing thus far. And he's really the first Doctor to me that understands that. Christopher Eccleston says, yeah, it's still going to be me, but I'm going to look different. I'm going to still have my same memories, but I'm going to look different. David Tennant understands that it is a destruction of the self and a rebirth of something new. Uh-oh. We have lost the professor. Okay.
No, I am. A brand new phone, and it does things differently. So I pressed a button, and it said it was counting down to self-destruct, I think, or it was a emergency temporal shift or something.
Emergency
sorry about
temporal
that.
Shift.
A Dalek. No, emergency temporal shift.
Oh, and as an aside, I'm wearing my brand new Smaug I Need More Yarn. Look at that. Yeah. Because, who doesn't need more yarn?
I'm just on All of My Friends Are Dead, the archaeologist t-shirt.
Well, I think for me, these two episodes are one of the most remarkable in David Tennant's run. It's funny to me that at the end of his run is where he shines the most in terms of the way he is presented to the audience. At least that's Absolutely. My take on it.
Absolutely. I think that's great. That's great. Yeah.
And then we get the very first words out of Matt Smith is Geronimo. And, we get set up for this guy who's going to take, and he's the youngest person to play the Doctor at this point is Matt Smith.
Yes. Yeah,
He is the youngest, and I hate his hair. I do. The first series, his hair is terrible. I absolutely despise it. But are we ready to? I mean, do you have any more points you'd like to make about the end of time?
I think it's worth. I think it's good that we gave that time to thinking about David Tennant and the end of David Tennant.
I will say, to me, it seems almost apropos that it's Wilf who knocks the 4 times. It's a human in the end that actually is the one who knocks the 4 times, and David telling him, "I wish you were my dad." You know, and I'm just like, no, you.
Well, can we talk about Wilf briefly then? Because you've insisted on delaying it even further. But Wilf is also a really interesting character from a British perspective, because he embodies the end of empire, and he's an ex-serviceman. We learn he was in Palestine. You know, we know he was part of the British process by which, you know, after the Second World, we know he was there liberating concentration camps. We learn that he simultaneously represents the sort of very best of British imperial military intervention and the very process in which Britain declines from its world stage. Or I'm just saying that's what I think we're supposed to take from Wilf. He is supposed to embody something very patriotic in a romantic, in a nationalistic and romantic way, but also in a lovable way. And therefore he's a bit of a, obviously there's nothing, not a bad bone in his body. There's nothing nasty about him, but he embodies that. He understands history. He understands the lessons of history in a way which the younger British characters are not really supposed to get, or in the show. And he understands the injustices in the world. And he's very much a bystander until the moment he basically he sort of has that pivotal role at the very end that you don't see coming. What is Wilf doing? He's just a bit of a sideline. Oh, look, we've got old Bernard Cribbins jollying along. He's, you know, granddad of, you know, Donna, and he's hanging around. You don't really know what he's doing in the show until that very moment where you begin to understand how important he is for the Doctor and for, you know, the story. So I can't.
What I like about Wilf's character is that he's gone through all this. He explains that to us at the end, that he has seen the most horrific things that a human being can actually witness, and didn't allow it to make him hard. It actually allowed him to be open and soft and vulnerable. He saw the tragedy of the world, and he could have built up walls and said, I'm never going to let anything in because I can't deal with that kind of horror. But instead, he is the eternal optimist. And in that way, I kind of identify with Wilf as the guy who's like, I will look up every night at the stars and think of you. And he's like, you know, if you have to do something, do it. If you know, go and protect yourself if you need to. But in all of that, he's also so very soft and vulnerable and willing to be emotional and willing to show that emotion. Yeah. And as
the
a
Doctor
man,
admits he admires him, that he looks up to him, that he respects and admires him, not the other way around. Because he said, we must seem like insects. You know, must seem so small like to you.
Insects. Or yes. Yeah. But what he actually ends up doing, and what I love, is that Wilf allows himself to move beyond the toxic masculinity, especially of his time. If we think of him as being a product of his time, he's so far beyond the toxic masculinity that he's sitting there crying with the Doctor. And what person who's gone through that and has been taught, no, men don't cry. We shoot things, we kill things, we beat up things. And he's now in front of another man and just kind of like, here you go, here's my entire heart. You can see all of my emotion. And they play it so well as they don't use that scene as a way to make fun of Wilf, but to show the humanity that he brings to the table. And I'm just like, I love you so much, Wilf. And Bernard, I mean,
the show gives so many good,
beautifully.
Show gives so many positive role models of different ages and genders for people. I think, you know, whether they're baddies or they're goodies or they, you know, whatever their arc is, I think there's some really great stuff. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of that, but we haven't even got around to Matt Smith yet. So what do we say about Matt?
Hey, we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good, I think. In fact, I'm getting the episode list of the first series, so we're ready. We're ready to go.
Okay.
Doctor Who, and I'm even using the British term first series, because even though here it's first season,
I'll get you saying Van
What
Gogh
I want to
before we
do,
know it.
I wanted to be polite to you since you're so wrong with your Van Gogh that I give you instead. I've got to give it to you. You know, I got to do something nice for you.
Well, you know,
So
it's
here
like
we are.
Amazon deliveries. The van comes and the van goes.
Exactly, the Van Gogh. And this is something, by the way, we've been doing for a little while.
Petty
Okay, so
rivalries. Petty rivalries. Of course, I don't reduce myself to such things. I'm above such petty squabbles. But the rabbi insists, so you know.
Okay, so the very first episode is the 11th hour. And
Yeah.
I love that, of course, the play on words, because, of course, we're now into the 11th Doctor. And he has, at the end of it, he has 20 minutes. 20 minutes to save the world. And can he do it in 20 minutes? And that opening scene, the TARDIS is like exploding on the inside and is completely and totally just in ruin. And we find out a few things about the TARDIS. One, there's a library and a pool, and now the pool is in the library.
Yes, of course.
And we get introduced to the first of the trope of this new kind of thing, which is the girl who waited, Amelia Pond. You know, she is now then looked at as the girl who waited, and later on we have the impossible girl, and that's not really a plot trope that I'm into, but, you know, here we are. What were the takeaways you have of that very first episode, the introduction to Matt Smith?
Okay, well, I hated Matt Smith, and I ended up liking him, but almost in spite of myself. I suppose the first episode, the theme is, again, hidden alien that no one can quite see or realise is there. The kind of haunted house scenario, which at the very end of the season, the Doctor admits houses can be haunted by the memories of the people in them, he says, in a throwaway line at the end, but in the Big Bang. But we do have this idea that she's living in this big house and everything's empty and people are gone, and they are. It's never properly explained, but we learn that the crack in time is sucking up the identities of people into oblivion, and oblivion through the whole series is about lack of memory, of amnesia. Amnesia and oblivion are connected, and that's, I think, the common theme. And it's introduced in this episode, so that's my first takeaway. My second point about this first episode is that it's about establishing the Doctor's identity as the guardian of Earth. It is protected, you know, and that. But the other thing is, I think it brings, this series brings more historic settings than any before, foregrounded. So a lot of the 11th hour is set in Llandaff, near modern Cardiff in South Wales, around the beautiful medieval cathedral. It's War Memorial, the War Memorial, which is featured where in the Family of Blood, and a lot of the scenes there. But the landscape, the contemporary landscape of the phone box, fire engines, people walking their dogs, and the theme of alien possession or emulation of human beings. That, you know, it's that whole horror element of whether it's Santa Clauses, mummies, shop dummies, you know, mannequins. You know, it's the horror that this is someone in disguise. You have that element. But anyway, it's just the contemporary landscape. You've got the medieval gatehouse in the backdrop at one point. It's a really good episode for seeing contemporary society, but the old traces in contemporary world. So those are the things I got from that first episode that have an archaeological, you know, dimension to them, I suppose. I thought it was really, you know, really interesting. But no, the plot itself is about the standard thing of an alien that's going to threaten the Earth indirectly, not because the alien wants to destroy the Earth, because it's a prisoner in hiding, and the Atraxi want to take it, and don't really understand that humans are you know, are not to blame. So that's all I got from it, really, from an archaeological point of view. I like the contemporary landscape of the settings of the Welsh filming locations.
For me, the episode does obviously set up the identity of this person taking over as the Doctor, and sets up, of course, we have Amy Pond, who is going to be the next companion, and we also have Rory, who I think at first they introduce as this buffoon, this kind of befuddled. he kind of chases Amy around and feels like, I'm just so lucky she even looks at me. He kind of has that kind of way about him. Even though clearly he is an intelligent person, you don't become a nurse, easily. Becoming an RN you have to have intelligence. You have to have an ability to understand human anatomy. So the fact that they kind of make him a nurse, but he's so befuddled and kind of babbling on and like, I just want Amy to like me, is odd. Like, and right in front of the doctor, here's her and her mate, and she's literally saying, well, he's kind of my boyfriend. And he just is like, yeah. So first we have that dynamic. We also have the dynamic of Amy is angry, and she has every right to be. Here's this person who said, I'll be back in 5 minutes, and doesn't show up for 12 years. And she literally did, as we find out later, kind of wait. And it became a part of her personality. She's made paper dolls, and she's made like clay figures, and her raggedy doctor has entered into her conscious to the point where she had to seek help for it. But that first scene of him, like, you're Scottish, fry something, and new mouth, apples are rubbish, beans, terrible beans, and fish fingers and custard. Now, I know as an aside, it was actually cake. They took pieces of cake and they drenched the cake in like panko crumbs to give the impression that it was fish fingers and custard. But I will say that I have tried fish fingers and pudding, because that's what
I haven't. I'm going to now.
It's not all that it's cracked up to be. But for the underlying, of course, is the crack in the wall. We do know that, like you said, the oblivion, and from a religious aspect, to me, the thought of oblivion is worse than the thought of death. Because for Jews, what is remembered lives. So the idea of this oblivion where, like you mentioned, the amnesia almost. So not only are they gone, but they're not remembered. To me, that is the scary part. That is what brings about the idea of fear, isn't that we have loved ones who pass on, but then we have no memory of them. They've gone into the ether as if they never existed. They never made an impact. They never changed or challenged or did anything that would make us better people. To me, that is the more scary part of that overarching, the long story of Matt Smith's first series, is the idea of oblivion and amnesia.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
And I think it was just kind of a cheesy, introduction to Matt Smith. I will admit that part with the Atraxi where they're showing the, all of the bad guys that he's fought. I don't like that they included the Ood, because I don't see the Ood as really people that he has fought as much as a race he fought for.
Yeah.
So I didn't like them including that, but then I do love showing every doctor up into David and him kind of walking through that like mist and just saying basically run, and then the come along pond, and he leaves and comes back because again, we know that the TARDIS has now gone through her own metamorphosis. And I do refer to the TARDIS as female because so does he. And this is the first time he sets up and establishes that he has a relationship with the TARDIS. Because when he opens that door after she has been reborn, he says, "Hello, you sexy thing." And then that later comes back when she, in her human visage, says, "Well, yes, you call me sexy." And he says, "Well, only when we're alone." So you know that he has a deep love and almost relationship with his box. That sounded much dirtier than I meant it, and I apologize for that, Professor. But we start that right there. Hello, sexy. So we now know that his connection isn't just to people, but to the TARDIS itself. And so I love that part. But other than that, it's not the strongest episode in his first series, yeah. But it definitely is a good establishing of the character. And I apologize, I'm going to just come at a camera for a second.
Nothing to do with our discussion here, but I should point out to listeners that another, I think, pretty amusing in hindsight thing about that episode is that it features Tom Hopper who goes on to play, among other things, Billy Bones in Black Sails and Luther Hargreaves in The Umbrella Academy, as the pretty one that is not the not Rory character. So I like Tom. I like that, because yeah. Anyway, I've seen him in other things, but I thought that was really funny. So, do you want to do the Beast Below? Anything about the Beast Below? Because that's a really interesting episode, isn't it?
So to me, the Beast Below is literally a parallel between the Beast and the Doctor. In Amy's own words, what you would do if you were the oldest and last of your kind, and you heard children crying? What would you do? And I love Liz 10 for multiple reasons, not of the least of it, she's beautiful. And it also kind of brings to light what we're willing to do, what we're willing to sacrifice, and the lengths will go for survival. Every 12, few years, you're allowed to learn how the UK ship is sailing through the stars and decide, are you going to vote no, or are you going to say yes, have your memory wiped so you can go about without any knowledge of the actual tragedy and pain that your existence is causing to another life form.
Of course, what they didn't know when they wrote that episode is that's what was going to happen in 2016, and we're having our memory wiped at the moment over the cataclysm of Brexit. But we were like ship UK sailing off into some freaking middle of the Atlantic, pretending we're not part of Europe. Anyway, that's another bit of politics there, ladies and gentlemen. But no, seriously, what I think is really important about that episode, it's another scary mannequin episode. It's another scary monks episode, because there's basically, it's almost a quasi-religious order who are running Liz 10's government, and they are sort of dressed as monks. It's another scary, this this horror, religious orders horror thing. We saw it with the werewolf Queen Victoria episode. It's another repeat theme. But for me, what's really interesting is this is one of the archaeologies of future Britain, where you've got this idea of the UK is heading off into outer space to escape environmental collapse, and is doing so on the back of this whatever thing, this creature. But I also knows a bit of English. Being a chauvinism, that you get to see the names of a few English counties only, but you don't see what happens to Scotland, Northern Ireland, or Wales. They're there, and their names are out of sight for political correctness, or they have been jettisoned. So I'll leave that hanging. But no, that's the only points I wanted to say about that episode.
It seems that way to me too. That you see Surrey and a few other places, but that's really it. And then
Phil on TikTok will like that, because he's always got. If you know Phil on TikTok, he's always going on about Surrey being the best place in the universe. For me, it's just a dead zone where just rich people live. He likes to think it's good. But anyway,
I guess I'm not visiting Surrey when I come to the UK.
Oh no, it really is the last place you want to visit. It's overpriced, cultureless, sort of vacuum south and west of London, But it's an embarrassment for us all. It's like parts of East Cheshire.
For me, the episode really is a parallel between the loneliness and what can you do to help someone else, and the idea that they didn't have to hurt this creature to be able to get the help that they needed in the first place. But that speaks to the way that humans think in the first place, where we don't think anyone is going to reach out to help us. We think we have to tame the wild. We have to bring it in under our control in order for us to work hand in hand. We don't believe in interconnectedness, of ourselves and the outside world, the environment, the living natural world around us. We have to lord over it and be masters of all we survey in order for us to survive and to continue. And I think that's some of the ways they play with that episode, is to show that was not really ideally the way to do it.
atrocities are allowed to thrive because of active amnesia, active forgetting, active decisions to not know, that your system is based on those inequalities, on those and if you're presented with an either or of, well, you accept these atrocities or the world is going to end, then you will obviously accept those atrocities. Well, some people have to be the same.
Literally
Some people
built.
have to have the crap jobs. This is the way it is. And if you're happy to live that way, then you'll go on indulging it. But then it's never such a simple opposition. So that's the whole point of that episode, is to make you think there are hope. There's hope. I think willful ignorance.
And I like a little bit of a couple of the pop culture references. Of course, mind the doors instead of mind the gap when you're getting onto the elevator. Just a little bit of interesting things they throw in there. But I think ultimately, and then his reaction to, does he choose the creature or does he choose the people? And the way he gets so angry and says, no one has anything to ask me today, because I have three choices. I can say goodbye to humanity and I can release this creature. I can kill, this creature, or I can numb it in the least, most humane way possible so that it no longer feels the pain. And I'm about to do this horrifying thing. So no one gets to ask shit of me today. Everyone gets to shut up and let me do this, until Amy has this realization that the creature loves the children. That kid, that up comes the scorpion-like tail and is just playing with the kid. You think it's going to hurt this kid. And even the monks say, well, it never eats the children. Well, yeah, it's the children that it came to save. It didn't, you can die in a fire as far as the creature's concerned, but it heard the cries of children and said, well, I can come help that. I can do something about that. So that's the first time you see him overly emotional about his role in the universe and the choices that he is faced with making. Do I save all of humanity? Do I save the creature? Is there an in-between? And then his human companion, Amy Pond, is the one who steps in and says, have you thought about this option instead? Maybe it's not either or. And so that I do love that. Now, I know one of your favorites is Victory of the Daleks, because we get the iron sides. So,
KBO, Doctor. KBO. No, yes.
KBO, which has now become a personal joke between the professor and I, the occasional text of KBO.
So yes, okay, Victory of the Daleks. So this is another retro Second World War, ridiculously simplistic, patriotic British episode on face value. But actually, the thing that I want to take out of this episode is nothing to do with the Daleks and another Second World War theme. The real thing that for me is, from an archaeology point of view, is this is another example of through androids we understand what it is to be human. And poor old Bracewell is this troubled, he's a creation of the Daleks. He's evil Dalek technology. He's an android with a personality. And yet he breaks out of his system. He becomes more human than the Daleks could hope for him to be. So it's another play on the theme we've already encountered about the Daleks themselves becoming human. And he imagines he has this memory of Dorabella, and he wants, he's in love, and the Doctor allows him salvation. The Doctor helps him escape his programming to live a life. He's one of a series of characters set free by the Doctor to live their life, to not necessarily be directed in a particular way, but the Doctor is a facilitator of non-human things becoming whatever is thought to be human, having human qualities of love, of care, kindness. So, we see humans like the top become evil through the horror of Cybermen, Toclafane, those kind of cyborgian. We have various androids that have human appearances but do horrible things. We have humans being possessed. But here's the flip side of a lovely little android that is a good guy and does good things. And there's not this. We see that in many episodes of salvation arcs of characters that are set up for evil, made for evil, but survive. So that was my takeaway. Although it's another Second World War episode that plays on we saw in the first season, the Eccleston series of the But I love, of course, the "Would you care for some tea?" you know,
I know.
that's the
I
best.
remember when we watched it, you were like, "Here it comes." I love that bit
I
too.
love the fact that the Daleks have like little water packs, like Tommy's. You know, you'd have your full, your military kit. So you have you have your Tommy hat, you have your ration
And
pack, and you have
their
your
little
little water.
flag.
What the heck is a Dalek going to do with a water canister hanging off his side? It's so comedic.
I feel
It's
like I need
brilliant.
to find one of these Daleks that are dressed like this and send it to you for like Hanukkah or something. So
Hanukkah Dalek, fantastic.
a Hanukkah Dalek. Well, listen, Christmas is rubbish, according to some people I know. So yeah. So the
Oh, it
next
is.
two are, of course, are The Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone. Now, for me, I love this because we have like almost this paladin type people. They're the army, but they are priests. They are religious, holy warriors. And I love it because the bishop, and all of these are like priests that are seen as also warriors. And I absolutely love that. And of course, we get River Song. You know, Professor Riversong has joined us again for the next 2 episodes, and she is the one who calls them to come and help her because she is on the hunt for something. And it ends up we're back right with the Weeping Angels again, and now we're in with Weeping Angels in a way that we have a first glimpse of how they take over other people and kind of turn them into Weeping Angels. It's no longer, we're now getting a glimpse into how they kind of create new angels, and we're also starting to learn more about that kind of oblivion, and you don't remember this, you don't remember that. There's a couple of scenes where Amy cannot remember something, and there is the doctor going, wait, you don't, okay, and he's starting to kind of the dawn of realization that there's something bigger at play than just what he originally thought there was. And I also believe that this episode arc is a lot about trust. She has to close her eyes and she has to trust that who is leading her back to safety is going to do so. And she has to have that faith. To me, and as you know, for me, faith and trust are the two biggest parts of the show in general, is the humans having faith in the doctor and the doctor having faith in himself and his human companions to save the day, kind of thing. So what are your takeaways, Howard?
I think this is really interesting because this is the first time since series 2, The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, where we have outer space archaeology. So I don't think, or maybe the Ood's planet is part of that as well. But anyway, here we are in series 5, and the scenario is the Byzantium has crashed onto this planet of the Atlan, and they have to navigate through this Atlan temple. And this is religious architecture of the Atlan people, designed over 6 layers representing their cosmology. So you're in not only ancient ruins of a dead civilization, but also you're in a holy building, holy set of caves where it's a catacomb. It's where the dead are buried and memorialized through statues. So it's not a temple. So it's a mausoleum, right? So it's in a funeral, a necropolis. You're basically in a subterranean necropolis. So this is mortuary archaeology. This is great, right? And all of the statues, and don't contradict me because I'm going to contradict myself in a minute, are, the doctor tells us, are the memorials to the dead Atlans, and their civilization has long gone. And then he goes, so we're in a funerary archaeology environment of subterranean catacombs where all these statues, wonderful idea, right? So that's the setting, is purely archaeological, but in outer space, of an ancient lost civilization and its funerary architecture. Wonderful. And then the doctor shows himself to be one of the most dim-witted archaeologists. I said about how the doctor has archaeological dimensions, but he's so thick as an archaeologist, so dim-witted as an archaeologist. And I've had moments like this too, where you're supposed to be the whole point of archaeology, you interpret material traces, and we all make bloopers, but the doctor's almost kills them all through his blooper. Was that he goes, yeah, they were great, they had And he talks about the Aplans, but then he goes, oh yeah, but, and he doesn't quite connect up that he remembers having visited the Aplans, how they had two heads. And then, like, when almost to the point where it's too late, he realizes, oh yeah, none of the statues have two heads. These aren't statues of Aplans. They are really emaciated, eroding weeping angels who are losing their form through lack of power. And so, it's hilariously stupid as a plot line because, how can the Doctor forget that? How can the Doctor not realize, connect up his knowledge of a living people? And he's had the privilege that archaeologists have of actually being there when these things were alive. And despite that, he actually is able to time travel. He can't do the basic observational skills of going, oh yeah, but I remember the Aplans having two heads. So why are these statues not got two heads? Let's deduce what that means. So it's really comedic and ridiculous, but it's also it helps us to think that, despite having time travel capability, he still can't get his head in gear. Perhaps because it's the world is timey-wimey, that university, maybe he visited them in his terms hundreds of years in his lifespan back, that he can't remember the basic morphology. He's seen so many species. I mean, it's something we couldn't do, but as a Time Lord, that's actually an impediment. Whereas if there was an archaeologist there, as there is, and they knew, then they should have made that inference. So anyway, that's the first point. I think it's a mortuary archaeology environment. The other thing, of course, it's another sinister human takeover, but not an alien takeover of a human body. It's the angels taking over the voice of Bob the priest, one of the soldiers, and talks to him in the voice of Bob. That is one of those sinister horror moves you can do. It's not possessing a human body and speaking through your voice, but taking the voice out of the person and speaking to the Doctor through the voice. Are you there, weeping angel Bob? Yes, I'm here, sir. What do you think you're doing, sir? You're going to die. It's so terrifying. So I love that aspect of that takeover. And those are the points I wanted to share from that episode. It's another pair of episodes because it's the Flesh and Stone, Time of Angels and the Flesh and Stone one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and for me, watching the way that the angels kind of take over people, it's terrifying, because what are we afraid of? It's like, if we look back into media, the idea of pod people taking, are you being replaced by something that looks like you or like the voice, Angel Bob. And it's the first time we also kind of get an insight into the idea of what the angels want, because they now have a mouthpiece, and it's Angel Bob, giving them the mouthpiece. And then we have the foreshadowing with River Song. The bishop is like, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to let him know who you really are. I'm going to tell him, who you are and what you have done. So we have that kind of foreshadowing who River ends up being to him in relation to him. And that's kind of our first foray. For me, the next episode, Amy's Choice, it's not one of the stronger ones.
Vampires of Venice?
Oh, shoot. Yes, Vampires of Venice. I apologize, Professor. I don't have much to say
about this, other than it's another suspicion of strange, dodgy religious orders who take children or young women into their care. Another suspicion of organised education and organised religion. And it's another example of historic vampires, kind of, but they're not. They're kind of fish people. And it's all rather ridiculous.
You do get it to the backdrop of Venice, which is a beautiful, beautiful environment. If you're going to have a bad guy, why not have a bad guy in Venice, I guess?
Absolutely. And it's incredibly camp and ridiculous with the male vampire, isn't he? He's just absolutely, ridiculous.
And then you find out they're not necessarily vampires, but weird fish creatures.
Yeah.
And it's really, they're trying to rebuild their race. Like, that's the issue that I have with some of the bad guys or the villains in these episodes, is at the end of the day, are they actually villains? If we saw it from their perspective, are they really villains? Or are they just trying
they're escaping the silence, aren't they?
Survival?
They're running. Their planet was consumed by the silence, and so Helen McCrory can definitely make me into a fish creature any day. I like her, but R.I.P. Sadly, she's passed away. But great actress. Great in Peaky Blinders.
She was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so Amy's Choice. For me, Amy's Choice is about what is reality versus what is fantasy. And can we possibly find ourselves in a way where we're living more of in our fantasy world than we are embarking into creating a reality that makes us just as happy as the fantasy we want to live?
Yeah.
That's how I see Amy's choice. Is we have, and Amy's literal, she doesn't talk about it, but her literal fantasy world is her being pregnant and being married to Rory. Although the hair, you could miss me with the hair. And Rory is a doctor. Again, we have this Rory is bumbling and he's like so not insightful, but he's managed to become a doctor. You know, I don't think they do Rory well in the first part of this series. And exactly, we have then this dream villain who is like, you know, you have to choose which is the reality and which isn't. And eventually they know the reality is the more harsh one, them freezing inside the TARDIS. And to me, I think that's a little bit of it. You know, they realize that the reality is not this kind of hazy, beautiful sunrise, sunset kind of thing. And even that realization is what kind of snaps them too, at least in my opinion. And I like Amy's choice, but it is definitely not my most favorite of the series. And same with the next two, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. The best part of that for me is meeting Madame Vashta. That is the best part of those two episodes, is that we get the introduction of Madame Vashta, who is a lesbian lizard.
Toby Jones being in it, of course, just why...
Oh, yeah, I love Toby Jones.
Let's just have a spin-off series of the Doctor being Toby Jones. I would do that. In fact, I think they should have two Doctors. Mackenzie Crook and Toby Jones, metal detecting for TARDIS in Essex. If anyone sees the director's detector...
I would watch the hell out of that. Toby Jones, as an actor, is remarkable. I've loved him in pretty much anything he's done. Yeah. And the first time I remember seeing him is in Ever After. You know, just as that little page, you know, who is like, and he's just this like tiny little unassuming guy, but I love his role in that movie. So,
and can I also make the other point that another key point about episode 7 is, again, the contemporary landscape with the ruins of a medieval castle, again filmed in South Wales and the Welsh border at Skenfrith Castle. This is a really beautiful tourist location, another borders castle. All I'm saying in the context of this episode is another use of archaeology to provide the backdrop. Beautiful medieval church, ruined medieval castle, little beautiful village. Nice. But the next ones are also Welsh setting, Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. Welsh subterranean, you know, mining is a theme. The churchyard is again key, another funerary archaeology element. The implausible plot that somehow, why are the lizard people Homo reptilian? Why are they coming all the way from miles under the earth to steal a few people's bodies out of graves? Is that supposed to be the idea that dude was experimenting on them? I mean, it's not made sense.
That was something I was going to ask you. Is we see the grave being opened up and there's no one in there. We know they're being stolen out of their graves, but they never explain that. And then the other thing, and I'm going to say this as someone who is a Jewish person, the idea of the hollow earth and lizard people living at the center has been an anti-Semitic trope that has been used over the years. Now, I don't know that that's what the writers intended. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they just said, hey, this might make for good, entertaining TV. But there's more often than not that there is a trope, a anti-Semitic theory that we are all actually covering our skin, we're lizards, and that we've come from this kind of hollow earth existence. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not so invested in this arc as maybe I would some others, because I've seen it used against Jews in other types of media and in other
and since you're in America, we obviously need at least every second article in every major newspaper for the next year discussing this. There's no evidence for it, but let's see both sides of the debate. Maybe there's something in it. Let's talk about it.
There's
ad nauseum.
You know, Homo reptilian. Why Homo reptilian? Yeah. Why aren't they just hetero reptilian? I mean, that's just me being ridiculous. You know that.
It doesn't make any sense. But I love the idea of the subterranean and the horror of the subterranean.
I do that.
The sleeping, the idea of indigeneity, I suppose you could say, is a positive theme. The idea that these are the arguments about who would take part. So we get this later on with the Zygons, who's going to have the Earth and sharing the Earth ideas. Would the humans ever share the Earth, and would they share them with reptiles from under the world? So there's nice ideas there, but it's botched and it doesn't really work. But I love the idea of the coal mining heritage, the South Wales valleys, the dangers of digging. Because remember, these are communities where everybody lost someone in the mines. I lost great uncles in the mines. If not through actual pit accidents, then definitely through premature death, through lung disease. That idea of the horrors of the subterranean is perhaps not that I don't think how much it was conscious, but I think that was a accidental positive of that. But I concede that it's dodgy territory all round. Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I would like to say. Vincent and the Doctor is probably my most favorite episode of this first series. Not just because Vincent van Gogh happens to be one of my most favorite painters of all time, but just the care that they take in presenting his story and the way they show that you can't outlove someone's mental illness.
No, I can't talk about this objectively, so I won't. I agree with everything you say, and I want to hear what you think about this. Again, all I will say is that I like the fact they filmed this in Croatia, so you've got some vaguely non-British scenery for once. You've also got a church, and they go back to Llandaff Cathedral to film part of the church. They also go to the ruins of Neath Abbey, a medieval Cistercian ruin, to film the final fight scenes with the monster, with the Creface. So there's archaeology backdrop, which I love. And I do love the fact that, of course, we know that, we have the story of this idea of a painter who's going to paint the destruction of the TARDIS, which comes in the next episode. But so I like that aspect. But beyond that, those are superficial, perhaps, elements. What people really, the cemetery and the church setting is important, I think. But it's perhaps just setting. But for me, it's important because you see a medieval effigy tomb inside Llandaff Cathedral in the background. So, that's a really, really cool thing for me, but perhaps no one else cares. But it's the storyline which we need to talk about, which I feel so wonderful. It just works. And it's not overplayed. I think it's done very well.
I'm passionate about this. I love that we open with Bill Nighy, and let's just not pretend like Bill Nighy is not one of the best actors ever. Bow tie, we're talking, the little references of bow ties are cool. And
thank you very much.
Then we have them decide they're going to go and visit Vincent. And to me, we know that Vincent van Gogh was mentally ill in some way. And that in that illness, Amy thinks she's going to save him. If I just love him enough or show him the positive impact that he has on the world to come, then maybe we can change his future. And I love that it doesn't, because it shows that you can't love someone out of their mental illness. You can be there for them and you can walk aside, you can walk beside them as they carry that burden, but you can't fix it for them. Although I love how quickly he falls in love with Amy. He's just like, I want to have children with you by the dozen, and that, they would be the gingiest, children ever born in history.
So one of the things that I like about the episode is how, I mentioned this before, the funeral scene where his own impending mortality is witnessed by the woman in the village who dies, the Creface kills her, and you see the procession. Yes. There's very few TV shows that will show just a simple funeral. There are other filmic examples of showing European traditional peasant, if that's a horrible derogatory, but peasant, farming society funeral scenes. But that it's always over dramatized, over gothicized. But I love the way in which that scene just plays out as just a little. They've watched. They stand to the side, and they watch the coffin go past, and that's just
And they
another. That's
see the
again, maybe that's just superficial.
sunflowers.
So, yeah, and the
I don't think that's
sunflowers on the
superficial. I
coffin.
love that they have the sunflower on the coffin just after Vincent is talking about why he doesn't like sunflowers because they're half in, half out.
Yeah.
You know, that his reason for disliking sunflowers is that they're almost literally like this kind of, you know, reminder of death. And I really like that about this specific, the way he sees sunflowers. And ultimately, we have to deal with the fact that while he finds out he's loved and he finds out that he is remembered in such beautiful and wonderful ways, we also see that it doesn't change anything. He still takes his own life. He still goes through the mental breakdowns that he does. And Amy ultimately almost feels like she's responsible. Why didn't what we did change him? We bring him back to the museum. Bill Nighy does this beautiful monologue about the impact that Vincent van Gogh has had on society and humanity as a whole since his death. And he's standing there in tears, feels that, and yet it doesn't change because, you know, especially at that time, mental illness was not something that could be, in fact, you know, you were just mad. People just thought you were mad and didn't want anything to do with you, threw tomatoes at you, you know, the usual thing.
Yeah. I have nothing else to say about the episode, not because it's not good. I just don't. I think you've said it all. That's brilliant.
Yeah, occasionally I'm smart. Yeah, and then of course we get to the lodger, and I know you have your views about who is in this particular episode. We talked about when we watched it, and I feel like it's kind of a filler episode.
I don't watch a lot of TV, so and even back then, I hadn't seen Gavin and Stacey. I didn't care about this character. He, and I even years later, when Carpool Karaoke, it's just not hit my radar. I don't live in a world that cares about people like that. I won't even say his name. He is just like another incidental, mediocre, Anton Deck style cruising celebrity moron, and I don't care. And he's all right in this episode, but I will say architecturally, the most annoying thing about that episode is that the upper half of the house, the flat, is a spaceship in disguise, and it goes away, and you're left with the most ludicrously stupid one-story add-on, which is clearly not the way a semi would have been built. And it's just like, as an archaeologist, it just makes me go, what the frick? That doesn't even look out. So anyway, that no one cares about that, but that's just me because I don't like James Corden. And I said his name. Maybe I'll evoke him. He'll come out of a corner somewhere.
I think as long as you don't say his name 3 times. No, I think it's like it's a Beetlejuice situation. As long as you don't say his name 3 times, we should be fine.
I don't think there's anything else I want to say about that episode. Another example of, you know.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay, let's move on. The Pandorica opens and Big Bang are the last 2 for our discussion.
Okay, so this one is where Rory turns the page for me. Rory turns a corner. And the Pandorica opens and the Big Bang. This entire time he's seen as, like I mentioned, he's like this comic relief add-on companion that we don't really respect. Amy doesn't really respect. You know that no one respects Rory, including, I think, Rory doesn't even respect Rory. And yet here we are. He ends up being the thing that saves Amy. He's the last centurion, and as you know, when we get to the Big Bang and the scene of him dragging the Pandorica through, fires dressed in his centurion gear, I cry every time. I cried this time again. It's never not affected me and it comes back later. They get into a fight later on in a series where she's yelling at him that she feels he doesn't love her, and he screams, "I waited for you for 2,000 years." And if that isn't what an epic love story is, then I'm just going to hang up my yarmulke, because you don't get more epic than someone whose undying love for you says, "I'll protect you over 2,000 years." He knows that he's never going to sleep. He's going to go mad. He's this nesting thing. He's not even human at this point. If he gets damaged, he can't repair it. If anything happens, he's putting everything he has into the hope and faith that at the other end of it, the person he loves is going to come out of that box safe and happy. So to me, that's when Rory becomes the best companion for Matt Smith. Like, I forget Amy after that. After that, Amy can go saw it off as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I become a Rory stan at that moment.
There's so much to discuss in this episode. I don't know how to articulate it, but can I try? It's got archaeological and time related themes, packed into this episode. It's messy. It doesn't really work. This pair of episodes, to me, it doesn't really work. It's very unsatisfactory, but it's brilliant in some ways. Of course, it's Stonehenge, the concept of an underhenge, where the Pandorica is resting. The whole trick that the Doctor thinks this is something powerful that he's got, when actually it's going to be his prison, basically waiting to shut the Doctor in, to close him off, and his enemies have collaborated against him. So the first point I want to say is that the Doctor comes out with the claim that the Romans are the greatest military force, not only in human history, but does he actually say in the universe history? Something ridiculous.
I believe he does say in the universe. It's completely ridiculous.
I don't know who paid him off to say that, but anyway, but that's one, isn't it? That's an interesting takeaway in itself. But let's not dwell on that. There's plenty of history bros who love their Roman military stuff. I'm not going to get into a fight with them. Let's just leave that. But I just observe that claim is made by the Doctor in this episode. I simply neutrally observe it. I would also point out that this is all about the archaeology of the TARDIS. The fragments of the TARDIS is pulled out of the crack, that the revelation that the TARDIS is going to become the destruction, the destruction of the TARDIS breaks up the universe. The cracks are caused by the TARDIS. His enemies can't understand, how can it be not the Doctor's fault? Who else can steer the TARDIS? Who else has destroyed the TARDIS? Basically all his baddies are thick as pig swill. They don't understand basic inference. And likewise, the Doctor doesn't really get the clues. Again, he's not a very good archaeologist. If he is an archaeologist, he doesn't understand if he can literally hold a fragment of his own TARDIS up to his own TARDIS and go, "Oh, look, it's the same," and not realise that the destruction of the TARDIS has caused the cracks in the universe. Then he's a bit thick. So in archaeological inference terms. Then you've got the themes of time and oblivion. Then you've got the multiple examples of authentic heritage discourse. So in Vincent, you've got we have in the Planet of the Dead, we have Lady de Souza stealing an object from National Gallery or whatever it's called. In Vincent, you've got an authentic authority art figure within a display of Vincent's art. In the hallowed halls of authentic heritage space. In this, you have the only way the Doctors can get a message can be got to the Doctor is by curating Vincent's art, showing the TARDIS blowing up through the royal collection that Liz 10 is curating, being stolen by Riversong from that. So it's stealing it back, and to get that, they have to go through another museum to get it that far. I can't remember where it is now. It's it's stolen from the Royal Collection, but there's also, of course, we get to the National Museum of Wales as the setting for where the Daleks and the Pandorica are being kept. That's filmed in that. So you've got museums and memory and time. Museums are seen as the places where time is preserved and authoritative time is bracketed, and yet it's also where it's undone. So I want to say that's a really interesting theme of heritage and memory. And I also want to say that, of course, the first point that happens is the oldest writing in the universe on planet one, 50 feet letter high on a diamond cliff, say hello sweetie, because that's the only way River Song can get the Doctor's attention to follow the trail. So there's lots of ideas of time and archaeology and museums as spaces for preservation of time, and the fact that Rory has been custodian of that Pandorica into museums and through the Blitz. There's that's I think that's really all I want to say, other than that this episode is steeped in archaeology. There's an archaeology to be done of these two episodes, and the way, not simply because they filmed at Stonehenge, not simply because they filmed, they have Romans in it, not because that River Song turns up as Cleopatra, and that doesn't make any sense because she's been long dead, and we know that all the Roman soldiers are just the memories of Amy's childhood anyway, but because not only because it has historical themes and historical places, but because museums and the nature of memory and objects and the echoes of the footprints of the Neverwhere, the Cybermen and the Daleks are preserved as sort of only touched by the light of the Pandorica until they come back to life. They become archaeology, but archaeologies of futures that have never happened. That's a really interesting idea. Archaeologies of the future, of future Neverwheres, which is a very sort of almost counter fossils, which is a really interesting idea. So that's just blurting out my thoughts on those episodes. Lots of archaeological themes, but you've already identified the bigger theme of playing through it.
So to me, part of the reason that this arc works for me is you see him stall for time. He stands up on that rock. All of these races from everywhere are going to come and destroy the Doctor. And he's like, I want you all to think about all of you who have come up against me before when I've had nothing, no ideas, and think about what I've come up with. And then I want you to let the other guys start first. And then that episode was all about him stalling, learning about what the Pandorica is. And then in the Big Bang, we realize it's about imagination made real. As you mentioned, here's Amy. It's her imagination that the space, the crack has been sucking her imagination. The Raggedy Doctor, the Roman soldiers, the Pandorica itself has all been curated through Amy's childhood play and her imagination. And he then, in the Big Bang, he knows everything that's going to happen. I'm going to disappear into oblivion. But he uses the time-honored, as I've said before, the idea of this Jewish what is remembered lives, to plant himself into the memory of Amy Pond. So she's at her wedding going, wait a minute, someone is missing. Holy crap, wait a minute, there's something that's supposed to be here that wasn't. Now, she has her parents back. We learned that they have been sucked in through this crack and, like you said, taken into amnesia and oblivion. At her wedding, she just realizes, wait, the most important person isn't here. And it's through the scene of River Song's diary, even though it's empty, that she's like, wait a minute, all of these things come back to me. And suddenly it's her that revitalizes and brings back from oblivion the Doctor. And I love that at that point, going forward, it's the Pawns. Come along, Pawns. It's not that Rory, Amy's not taking Rory's name. It's come along, Pawns. And that somehow both of those men know that they belong to Amy more than Amy belongs to them. That amuses the crap out of me. It always has. Is that, there's that. And that Rory somehow in all of it realizes his own importance. We come to that later on when a good man goes to war. Here is Rory, I have two questions. And one of them is, where is my wife? He stopped being the slapstick comedy companion relief and started holding his own. For in future series that he's willing to fight with Amy. He's willing to say, I have a place in this marriage just as much as you do. You don't get to just boss me around, kind of thing. I think that it also talks about the ways that our imagination become a reality. So for me, in kind of the spiritual sense, You know, it speaks to the ways that we convince ourselves of things, whether we convince ourselves that we're good, whether we convince ourselves that we're worthy, whether we convince ourselves that we are going to make something of ourselves. It's about how our inner thoughts and our inner voice affect our outside world. And, you know, Pandorica is just freaking cool.
I mean,
that's... Go ahead.
I mean, I suppose if we want to, again, thinking about the material thing, the Pandorica itself as a box that opens and contains the woes of the world, the allusions to Pandora's box, all comes from Amy's memories. But also, the idea, I think, is it's supposed to be a counter TARDIS, isn't it? Is that the TARDIS liberates him through time, allows him to go through time, to transport through time, but this is to fix him out of time, to take him out of time. But they are comparable. They are boxes, basically. And I think that there is supposed to be a play in that regard in terms of how we understand. Oh, I've frozen. Am I? Oh, I'm back now.
You're fine.
You know, so I think that's really interesting. But no, it's great. I've watched it a number of times, and I don't quite understand how the Doctor comes back into Amy's memories in the end. I've lost track of how it works. But I think the point you raised,
when he's putting Amelia Pond to bed, he tells her a story. In her brain, he tells her a story of the man in the blue box. Don't forget, you know, and all of space and time. So he implants that into her subconscious as a way of memory, like we've talked about, you know. So it's then her memory that allows her to remember, oh, wait, something important. Because remember, Rory hands her the diary, and it's like, you know, it's like it's something borrowed, something blue. And it's her looking at the diary going, wait a minute. This triggers this kind of memory for me. And then suddenly, you know, and he shows up because he's only there for the dancing, and he looks utterly ridiculous when he does it with his, you know, this bit. So I know we've gone through the first series. That's how people dance, don't they?
Dancing's cool.
I mean, I guess if you're British.
It's better than I can do.
Fezzes are cool as well. We've learned that. Fezzes are cool. Bow ties are cool. And jammy dodgers are awesome. I'm going to need 12 jammy dodgers. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I think I've run out of brain cells.
The first series here. What are you drinking in that Shakespeare cup?
I have tea. But it's gone now.
Wow.
Why do you think I was on alcohol?
It's a type of cookie, as it turns out.
Still got a little bit of whiskey left. I might go on to that.
So
use the same cup.
I found out I'm terribly American, and I thought a jammy dodger was a jelly donut, but it's not. It's a type of like cookie that has jam in the middle, sort of like a Hamantaschen. Oh, why? Thank you very much. I try to look. You know, I have my Smaug shirt with my yarn all over it. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. But do we have any questions regarding the first series of Matt Smith? Again, I always love doing this with Professor Williams. You're going to have to see us again. Are you willing to do another part?
I was just looking forward to. I mean, series 6 has got a load of archaeological themes in it too. A lot of historical time allusions. Yeah, there's plenty, and historic filming locations. So I've got more filming locations to discuss that are really important for the plot lines of some episodes that people might not realise. You know, we've seen a lot of actually Casteth Koch and and Skenfrith Castle and Neath Abbey and Llandaff Cathedral. But there's more to come. More. Yeah, so we could do a series 6, couldn't we? If people are interested,
we could. And I have a question for you, and this is terribly important. And I'm hoping that in asking you in this public forum, you won't turn me down, because I know you have gone through this multiple times, but you've never gone through it with me. So I was hoping maybe in the same vein as this type of live discussion we do about Doctor Who, if I could get you, would you like to do the same with Indiana Jones with me, Professor?
The films, all of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, we could easily take one by one, or we could do them as a collection. And I know if you haven't been to Professor Williams' blog, If you go over to his account and hit his link tree, his blog, connection to his blog is there. You can find all the ways he's talked about archaeology of Indiana Jones. But because this is definitely a series where you and I connect, it is literally about spirituality as much as it is about archaeology. We got to do the comics too. According to Nerdshed Projects, we have to talk about the comics as well. So that might be something interesting. I haven't either, so I guess we'll have to do a little research before this happens. But will you do Indiana Jones with me?
Yes.
Oh, good, because Marion Ravenwood, I'll fight you for. But anyway, I don't know if there's any questions regarding Matt Smith's first series or anything you'd like to add to the discussion. But, you know, Big Finish and the Big Finish audiobooks. I have listened to some of those Big Finish audiobooks in terms of Doctor Who. I think that might be something we have to get into down the road as well.
Yeah, that would be a further thing, wouldn't it? Yes,
we have a lot of intellectual chemistry in terms of the Whoverse at the very least.
It's bigger on the inside. I like that. The Whoverse is bigger on the inside. Very clear. That's a good point.
If you had to pick your favorite episode from Matt Smith's first series, what would it be, Professor?
In terms of archaeological themes, it's a toss-up between the two lots of double episodes. It's either Time Angels, Flesh and Stone, because it's all about an archaeological setting, an off-world, Aplan funerary archaeology. That is, or the Underhenge and the museum and the Pandorica. So those are the themes. So it's a toss-up between those lots. So I think I will go for the Angels, the Time Angels and the Flesh and Stone pairing of episodes.
One of our listeners says Rory was also the only one paying attention in the 11th hour. He wasn't just fumbling. He actually was paying attention. He's the one who saw how all of these coma patients were supposed to be in coma, and yet they're walking around. So that is an excellent point you make. He's presented one way, but really you can see just under the surface of what he's presented, there is a lot more there. So yeah, absolutely. I have a hard time picking my favorite out of the first series because, of course, Big Bang and the Pandorica Open are my absolute favorite in terms of storyline. But I think that if I have to, it's going to be Vincent and the Doctor.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. I mean, if you want a one-off episode that is just does a trick, it's that one, isn't it? But I think, there's a lot of good episodes there. And for ridiculousness, I love the idea of Daleks with water bottles strapped to them for no good reason. I just find that whole, it's just ridiculous. Would you care for some tea?
And I know the thing is that when we watch these together, I know you're looking for the archaeological significance for these conversations that we have. But as just someone who consumes media, if you can, I don't know if you can, I know I have a hard time doing it. If you can dissociate the archaeologist, a professor from Howard, what would your favorite be? Not on its archaeological merit, but just because it gives you, I don't know, the warm fuzzies, or you just go, oh, that storyline is perfection.
Of this series, I think it would be Vincent and the Doctor then. I prefer Doctor Who. Regardless of my interest, I think a lot of this is over pretentious, over complicated. It needs a simple plot. They go to one place. There's a monster there. They meet a historical personage. It just works. I think there should have been, and there should be more. I think we need. As I've said before, I don't want to see another Cyberman, Dalek, Sontaran ever again in my life. I want the Master to jog on. I want episodes where the Doctor just has an adventure over one or two episodes involving a minor disagreement over a cup of tea or something, something a little bit more, but where there's
way somebody says Van Gogh.
Excuse me while I co. See what I did there?
Yes, well, you speak English incorrectly. That's not my problem.
But my point is, I think it just works as a coherent historical episode, and I like that. So
I do too. Okay, and so in saying that, then, out of this particular series, what is your least favorite episode?
Well, a lot of them don't really wrap up properly and don't make sense in any way. I think The Beast Below annoys me with its futuristic, royalist, patriotic Britain on the move through space. Victory of the Daleks annoys me with its patriotic Britain up against the Nazis, kind of crap. So those annoy me. But I think I'll go for the Hungry Earth because it just doesn't quite make any bleeding sense. And the woman who
For me,
kills
neither.
the lizard person, I would have killed her way sooner than they killed her, to be honest. And why she's made out to be so bad, trying to protect her own father, and I thought that was just didn't quite chime. I thought she was right on Welsh lass doing what's right, kicking ass out of reptiles coming out of the earth. So I think that episode irks me most. Yeah. Oh,
And I
James
think about
Corden
that
though.
episode in
James
terms.
Corden,
Oh no, James
just
Corden.
literally get in the sea, James Corden, get in the sea, just to about here over your head, and stay there for an hour, and then float off out to sea.
Now, so the thing that gets me is, of course, he's almost jealous because he has the doctor come to play football with him, and then is mad that the doctor can play football.
Oh.
And it's all about because he has not gotten the ability to tell this woman that he loves that he just loves her.
But
And they're
I mean,
both
let's
stupid.
face
He
it.
doesn't want to go anywhere. She won't go anywhere because she really loves him. So she's not taking any job opportunities that she wants. And neither one of them have the ability just to look at each other and say, you know what? I just want to be with you. Can we just do that? And it takes all of this like emotional upheaval for that to even happen in the first place. Plus, it's James Corden. I thought he was gay. I did for the longest time. I just was like, James Corden's gay, right? I mean, he's not. And more the better for the LGBTQIA community that he isn't. But I just did. I thought he was just like one of us, and it was
I'm not saying
outrageously
anything on that.
upsetting.
All I've no comment to make about his orientation, or it's just something about his whiny. It makes Rory seem like a real kick-ass, determined person. When you have a James Corden around, you suddenly feel like a leader. That's what he makes other men feel like.
I'll give you that. I
He
don't
makes
know. Do we
everyone
have
else
any
feel
other?
like a leader. It's that
Do we
character, I
have
mean,
any?
not him. The character.
I don't know about that. Do we have any other questions from our lovely audience? I appreciate, of course, always you spend time with me, and I know you take time out of your very busy day of digging up things and researching things, and
I have been.
Been
a busy day, but it's been good. I've enjoyed this, and it's been great to have the audience again. Really quality comments, really quality interactions. I haven't done enough scarf waving. I think James Corden put me off. I was going to do more scarf waving, and he just killed my mojo. My scarf waving mojo was cordoned. I was cordoned to play for the. So I think when we move through
we're going to coin that term. We're going to coin that term for the next ones.
When we come back for season 6, I'll be free of the Corden curse, and I will be.
And
I'll
then
be
you'll scarf wave.
I'll do my scarf waving.
For those of you who don't know, when the professor gets very excitable, he has if you haven't been to his YouTube, also if you go to his over to his bio and look on his link tree, you'll find his YouTube. He does have a couple of lives himself where he's discussing something, and when he gets passionate, he starts to flap his beautiful
professorial waft of the professorial stuff.
Professorial waft.
Or something like that. I'm just making this crap up as I go.
I like it. No, I love it. I mean, you could do stand up.
Well, I certainly appreciate it too, Rabbi, because it's been great, and I learn a lot from. Because I don't. Obviously, my take is very weird and nerdy, and I don't have a sense of the broader narratives and also the insights into the things, the issues you've been raising about memory and time. I was grasping towards them, but it really helped me to clarify a lot of points discussing this with you both before and during this. So I've really learning a lot. So it's getting my brain onto a new level. It's forcing me to think in a different way. So it's really helpful.
We just with our powers combined, we make the best Whovian together, is really what it comes down to. So since we don't have any other questions and we're hitting about the 2-hour mark, I am going to wave everybody off. If you missed anything and would like to come back and be able to rewatch this particular live in the next couple of days, you're going to be able to find it uploaded onto Professor Howard's YouTube channel, also named Archaeodeath. Usually he has them up with 24 or 48 hours after we have gone live together. And then we will see you again for Series 6 and obviously some Indiana Jones. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Howard Williams on YouTube. In addition, consider following the Archaeodeath WordPress blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.